This is the video where we explore painting non-metallic metals, this time with the Sky Earth technique. This figure is a Reaper Yvonne. It's kind of a classic figure, and it's really great for our purposes, because you can see there's a lot of different places that we can show the horizon line, and that's really the biggest single thing that you need to think about with this technique. Regular non-metallic metal where it's just kind of steel plate, it's not as important, but if you're going to do the shiny, really shiny polished steel chrome, you need to really think about horizon lines. And this figure helps, and some of the colors will too. Have a range of different products here. I've got some Reaper colors out here. Blue liner. It's a very deep, very intense color. Not quite as thick as regular paint, but not quite as thin as some of your washes are. This is Violet Shadow. It's kind of a really nice dark blue. Got this intermediate blue from Vallejo, and also this underbelly blue. And we will kind of bounce back and forth between these two colors and the deep sky and verdigris. So these four, this is what we're going to use to establish this sky part of the Sky Earth. Well, and then to represent the earth tones, got some leather brown from Vallejo and this maiden flesh from Reaper. And some of these you'll find these will be mixed together. It's not just going to be these two to represent the earth. It's going to be a little bit of some of these other colors mixed in as well. And here I've got this is kind of a neutral white over here, the white scar. We may use this for some of the brightest kind of little spectral highlights, maybe even mixed with some of the maiden flesh. We may even throw in this ice yellow, because again, what's going to show up in some of your, well, the sunlight, and the sun is not necessarily going to be just dead white. Maybe we want a little bit of color to it as well. So we've talked about the miniatures, talked about the paints. We need to discuss brushes in our palette. I have the brushes arranged out on the palette in 3 primary groups. The first one, and I'll talk about the filberts. These are all-purpose brushes. You can see they've got this large flat surface. You get this tapered, rounded edge. Makes it nice for doing some blending, especially wet into wet. And one last element about these brushes is you get this chisel edge. So the flat surface, tapered, and the chisel edge. This is very nice for doing a technique that we call the shaded base coat. We'll get into that in the next segment. It comes in a variety of sizes. This is a 4. Most of these are 6s. I can go all the way up to 8 and all the way down to a 2, but I usually stick with the 4s and the 6s. This is a brand of brush that I use a lot. It's American Painter. Pretty easy to find. You can even get them on online. Decent price too. Really an economical price for what you get. And in the economy scale right here, we've got some of these. These are actually craft brushes. So number 8 rounds. It's a whole package. Comes in 10. Really not a bad price. Essentially 50 cents a brush. You can see when they're, especially when they're new, they have a really Really nice sharp point on them. But when they start to get a little beat up, like this one is, see, it's not really going to come to a nice point anymore. So that is very handy. You got a base like this, or somewhere you really have to jam in your brush just to get some paint in there. Why ruin your expensive, nice brushes when something like this that's already kind of past its prime can do the trick? Last group of brushes I'll talk about are these liner brushes. Prefer these to spotters because they hold a fair amount of liquid and paint. Yet they hold their edge, and you can get more work done with more control with these liner brushes. Again, you can see American Painter. It's kind of on the low end of the scale price-wise. In the middle, a mid-range brush, a Winsor Newton. Still a liner brush. Falls about halfway between the American Painter, kind of the real deal, genuine article, Winsor Newton Series 7. You can tell by the handle this has been used a lot, but because I've used all these other brushes, much less expensive brushes, to do a lot of the grunt work, this has stayed in pretty nice condition given how many times I've actually used it. That just about covers the brushes. Here we have palette, disposable palette. Comes in a package like this. Decent size at 9 by 12, and there's 40 sheets. You can get these at art stores, craft stores. We got these on Amazon. And probably the best part of this palette, it's got a nice resistant surface to it. But when it comes time to clean up, just take that sheet, you rip it right off, and you throw it away. Cleanup really doesn't get much easier than that. It's much better than trying to wash out a porcelain tray. We've got palette covered paints, brushes. We have a miniature. In this case, primed gray. I'll discuss why it's primed gray a little bit later. This was actually brush-on primer. I tend to prefer the brush-on because I never have to worry about what temperature it is, if it's raining or not, because I can do it inside, or it's hopefully temperature controlled. And nice thing about the brush-on is that I actually mixed this gray myself. Took a white primer and a black, made about as neutral a gray as I could. Especially when you got this kind of competition between the cool colors and the warmer colors, all in the grays. It seemed like an important thing instead of starting with stark white, like what the palette is. You can, again, if you want to use spray paint, that's fine. If you want to use white, that's fine. It's just, to me, it's a little more cost effective to use the brush-on primer. So now it's time to get started. Before we get started with the miniature, I thought I might do a few little sketches to serve as a reference guide for when we actually work on the miniature. I thought I might also explain the principles behind this whole sky earth. As you can see by the way these are arranged in this little mini palette here, obviously earth tones over here, your sky tones over here. That's why I've kind of set them out this way. We've got kind of a really darks over here. And what I'm going to do is try and kind of set the environment, set the context here that we're going to start out with the miniature. Now, with the miniature we don't have a background. We're in 2 dimensions here, so I have to kind of show a background. I'm going to mix that up now. I'm going to use one of these brushes here. Now, taking some of the blue and the brown together. I'm going to have to throw some brown out there again. I just want to get kind of a background color. That's neither, not really sky or earth colored. But we just need a little bit of dark here so that all the other work we're going to do shows up. Okay, so let's put a little bit of the leather brown back out here. There we go. So that's going to provide just enough context for us here. And the whole idea, we want to show this horizon line. Well, the way you show a horizon line is by making it the color of the horizon line. So what did I do? I just took the same color I've been mixing for, see, it's a little more blue, a little more brown. So I took some of that color here. This is a sword blade we're going to represent here. You can see how this horizon line is not just straight across. Even though this is think of this as a gauntlet on an arm, it's still going to have a few variations because, well, that's what a horizon line does. Now if you're going to get really crazy with this and you've got, say, a 72mm figure, well, you might actually have mountains or a person or whatever actually reflecting in that armor. We're just trying to teach you the basics here so we won't get that crazy that fast. But essentially, okay, to represent the Earth section, we've got our horizon line. Well, now we need the rest of the Earth section. It's reflected light. That's all non-metallics. That's what they really rely on, is that notion of reflected light. So let's do this on the sword blade here. And it's this notion of reflected light. What's it reflecting? It's reflecting the ground. Horizon line is going to be, we'll even make that a little bit darker. We're going to pull out some brown liner actually to do that, to make that darker. Now you don't want your reflected lights to compete too much with your highlights. You want the sky, obviously, to be much brighter than anything you do with the earth tones. So there we go. This is a good start on the earth tone part of this. But we need to do the sky now. And this is why I've used this kind of a cyan. It's essentially a sky blue. Same thing with our sword blade. I'm going to go with one of my number 8 rounds. This is going to get a little more intense. This deep sky. This is really a nice intense color. It's going to get even a little more intense with that sky blue. And now some verdigris. To continue to lighten it towards that horizon line. You can even put clouds in there if you wanted to. But again, we want to keep things a little bit more simple than that, especially if this is your first time with this technique. So back to the verdigris. Little touch of that maiden flush to keep it from getting too light too fast. You can see we've worked our way down towards that horizon line. Haven't gone anywhere near my lightest light yet. We're still working our way towards that. Again, just kind of working my way, picking away towards that horizon, getting brighter and brighter. Remembering to keep that horizon line an interesting shape. So think of this as kind of the edge of the gauntlet. Like so. Now at this point, so we kind of have our, that's what we've saved our white for. Just a few places along the horizon on our sword blade. It's gonna be right down here, right down the center, right along that edge. And not forgetting the sky. And now in opposition to that, the earth. A little bit of contrast. And we can make the earth tones more warm if we want it, but again, not as intense. That's what you're going to get on your horizon line. And as need be, you can tone down your blues if you feel that they're too intense. So this gives you a little bit of a sense now of sky and earth. And this is what we want to do all around the miniature. Just use the same colors I'm going to use here. So hopefully this little reference guide, this can actually help you into the future as well. You can kind of look back at this. So what in the world was he talking about? And so with this, I think we are armed and dangerous and ready to work on our miniature. I have the colors on the palette, and I've got the miniature set on an empty paint jar. Base is magnetized, and there's a piece of sheet metal here. I also put some blue tack to keep it secure. The whole idea is that I can turn this upside down as I need to. Get my brush wherever it needs to go. Now, first thing I'm going to do actually is throw some flesh tones on here. Not really going to show much of that on camera. We have a limited amount of time to work with, and this really is all about the metallics. I'll kind of, if there's any reflection of flesh tone onto the metal, I'll show that. But again, primary concern really is for the metallics, and there's really just the face and the hands. So when I was searching for the miniatures, I wanted one that had as much armor as possible and as little of everything else. That's about the extent of what I'm going to do on the flesh, which, however, still makes a nice earth color. And you're going to see not a whole lot. Doesn't look like much because we've got that neutral gray already on the surface. It looks so dark here, so it doesn't look so dark anymore. And that's the intention behind doing the whole gray primer, neutral gray, kind of take away the stark nature of that white palette. In some ways it also just makes the miniature a little less intimidating when it's not just this white. Heard of the white canvas syndrome? There's also the white miniature syndrome. So you can see, not really worried about overlapping at this point. There are a few times where I'm going to actually dip into that violet shadow, especially where I want it to be pretty dark. And you can see this is the whole shaded base coat technique, and it's about the best term that I could come up with for it. It's a base coat, and that we're laying the colors out on the miniature, but there's going to be some shading, basically preliminary shading. And there's a video all about shaded base coat if you want to check that out if you haven't already. And the reason why I'm kind of working the earth tones first, because the sky, that's going to be brushed down over the top. I just know how the way these brush strokes are going to work. The sky's going to be brushed over that, so it's much easier to put the earth on now. I'm going to start mixing in a little bit of the maiden flesh. And this is kind of the next principle of the shaded base coat, and that's called, I call it damp brushing. It's really not a dry brush. As you can see, there's a lot of pigment on that brush. But using that large edge of the filbert brush, I get this a little closer here. What I'm trying to put on here now in just a kind of a generalized way is the lighter part. We've done kind of the darker part of the earth. Well, let's get a little bit of that light. What I want to do is I'm going to turn this upside down, and now putting the stroke this way. Same thing on the sword. On shin guards, underneath the knee armor plate, underside of the chest plate. So instead of just taking one of your little tiny brushes and doing all these many brush strokes, we're trying to bypass that a little bit. The other thing too is by just sort of dragging the brush over the surface, it's a more natural way of saying, well, okay, this is where, that's where this light should be. Instead of having to kind of guess, it's just I'm pulling it here. I know along this bottom edge here, that's where some of the lighter earth color is going to be. Don't want to get too light too fast. So this is all about the earth portion, knowing in advance that the sky is what's coming next. What makes all of these different techniques kind of work together, the shaded base coat, all of the glazing and everything, it's all about patience, knowing what your next step is going to be, and you don't panic, because a lot of times things don't look like much, especially early on, and it just kind of leads to some panic. You say, oh my gosh, people are used to, I think, just taking the face and finishing off the face. The rest of this is still probably just primer. Well, there's a few practical reasons too. I don't like to do that, because when I used to work that way, I seem to always find a way to hit what I've just painted completely with my next, when I try to work around it, like the hair. I would do something to the face, or I'd be down here, brush hits the face. Here, if I'm doing all this kind of rough work all at the same time, there's no finished section to damage. So right about now, I'm going to call a halt to working on the earth part of this. Just going to do some quick little hits on the hands here. Whatever little bits of flesh there are. Not too much. See, I haven't even actually washed out the brush yet. So, that's enough there. And it's time to do the same thing with the sky portion. Now when I'm doing this, I'm going to be a little more careful. Not going to be quite so open and free with the brush strokes. And let a little bit of the intense sky color work its way in here. So what we're trying to do is about what this is. And I'm gonna take this brush, work it this way. So right away, this is starting to let me know, okay, this part's going to be sky. I'll work my way down through the chainmail here. Again, it's not a dry brush because we have a healthy amount of pigment on that brush. With the sword blade here, hold this on its side. Spin it around, same thing, going the other way. So already, while there's nothing but just the one color blue, the one color brown, essentially, we already Already have a nice context there for some more sky. On the chainmail, work down. So I'm holding the brush way down here on the end. It's important to do that at these early stages. You don't want to get too involved with details too early. So I'm doing the same thing here, just it carries this down. To the armor on the legs. There's actually on the feet, there's a plate there. Well, that's obviously going to catch some sky. You see, I stopped with the application here, right about at this line, because I know I want this to be one of those kind of DMZs between the sky and earth. Carry this down onto the leg all the way down to the foot. Shoulder, armor there. Gonna go back to the chainmail here. Some parts of this will be, and it works this way with just about every miniature you're trying to do this technique on. There's gonna be some parts that you say, boy, should I go this way with it? Should I go that way? Meaning, where should that horizon line be? Sometimes you just have to, force the issue a little bit. Because, well, we're forcing the issue on all of these little miniatures. This thing is barely over an inch tall. So that's why we have to kind of force shading on these. Even when we're not doing metallics, even though all you're painting is flesh tone, you have to kind of force the lights and the darks and the detail because it's so tiny, you just won't see those. And that's it's the same principle with this technique. So you can start to see how this is taking shape. And not too long from now, I'm actually going to take a smaller brush and start to refine this, so you can see almost treating the sky as a highlight. In a way it is. And that's essentially, the sky, that's where the light's coming from. It's coming from the sky, not from the ground. That's a whole different video. You can see I'm starting to work that sword blade a little bit lighter, because we got mostly the deep sky at this point. Allowing this to get more intense. Essentially, but by just feathering the brush over it like this, it lets me pick out, kind of by default, it takes away some of the guesswork of where should that horizon line be, what should be sky, what should be earth. I found over the years that it's just a really helpful way to find out where your sky should go, where the earth should be. I'm just about at that stage where I'm going to set the filbert brush aside and work with something that's a little bit smaller, something that has a little finer edge to it. So one last addition of some verdigris. You can see it's not taking much at all. So all of a sudden for that sword to look like our little pre-miniature sketch. See how this is letting some dark in there, working the lights. Now this, obviously, the top of the sword blade here, breastplate here, this is all going to catch more of the sky, more of the light than down here. So I want to make sure, ultimately, that your highlights reflect that. One last time with the filbert brush. You can see this is, you can really see some of these more intense lights begin to show up a little bit now. Down here, the feet, that edge of the knee pad up towards breastplate. So I'm going to grab this brush here and try to pick out a few brighter spots, especially here on this upper portion. So here on this chainmail, I'm gonna leave this alone, not gonna do any here. That top edge. This top edge is another important principle of the non-metallic technique is to lighten those top edges to get that good stark contrast between the light and the dark. So right here along this portion, get some decent light colors. Got this top part of the chainmail. Again, leaving this alone. Not gonna do that part. And so stuff like the face, the hair, I'm just gonna do some of that before we get to our next segment. You can see the gauntlet starting to look a lot like that, and the sword blade. So next, once all the rest of the shaded base coat's done, we're going to do a little bit of glazing. Now to the glazing portion of our technique. We've got a few very basic colors out here. From Vallejo, a black shade and a sepia shade, and then some GWs here. Kind of a blue nightshade, earth shade, nice brown, flesh shade for the hair, for the face, and also to tone down, we'll do a little mixing of the flesh shade with the nightshade. Makes kind of an interesting grayed down earth tone that'll be very handy. Now as I talk about this whole thing, glaze, wash, a glaze, at least as I see it, it's a very controlled wash. We get control by using a nice little liner brush to do our glazing. So what I'm going to do is take some of the sepia here. Actually, I'm going to use the hair as an example. So what I'm going to do is just be very controlled, very targeted with this. See, I almost didn't touch the light areas at all. If I do, sometimes I wipe it away. I just let gravity flow down into the crevice. I'm going to start up here again. And I'm just going to follow along this path. I'm only going to do, I'm not doing the whole thing over here. I'm just doing this one section. And then that run its course down all the way down through here. You can always do a second glaze, a third glaze, a fourth. You don't have to get black right away. That's the whole idea of the control. So here, this segment right there, I'm going to leave that highlight alone. Don't want to wipe that out. What I want to do is get some form down in these crevices here, and that's all of a sudden the shaded base coat really starts to come to life. That looked like almost nothing a few seconds ago. And all of a sudden now you've got some life. It's got some color, it's got some shading. On the top here even, so I actually put some of the wash right here, because that's that notion of reflecting. Not only would it kind of reflect the earth, but it's going to reflect the hair that's around it. And again, this whole notion of being able to hold the miniature on its side, use gravity, let gravity work for you, and then reflect that color onto the armor. Now I'm going to water this down a bit. It's the other thing you can do with your glaze, is just tone it down if need be. That's just going to be a quick little thing there to show the face. Gonna do the same thing on, got some toes there. On the hand. Got this little bit on the arm that needs to be shaded a bit. There's some parts here that are sort of a gold. So let's throw some there. And again, it doesn't take much, so you don't want to go too much too fast. So just leave that be. I've got these. Take a little bit of the black so I can mix that with the brown. And there's a few of these leather straps that I want to get. And there's the scabbard for the sword. The pommel, sorry, of the sword. If need be, just take my finger, take some away. Got the underside of the shield here. Not going to do a whole lot with that because we can't see it. Just going to throw some shadow down here. And just leave that be. Our focus is other places. So now we've got our blue shade here. What I'm doing is thinning it down. This is going to be our more intense dark, but we don't want it all to be dark, so I'm just going to do this. I'm going to start here with right here on this chainmail. As I work my way down, so I just dipped into the earth shade there. Obviously, it's coming down towards the ground. I wanted that to be more, not just dark, but more brown to show the reflection of your earth tones. Now, here, let's get this closer so you can see it. Right there. Trying to create a horizon line. Same thing on the gauntlet. So I didn't even touch this down here. It's all on the upper portion. Now here, where I've got some watered down, kind of a half and half mix between the blue and the brown. See, right there, all of a sudden, I've got a little bit of each. I got some brown, some of the blue. Do this again. Here, I think a little more brown. Over here, see, leaving this alone, leaving this alone. Back to that brown. Think horizon line. And then think wipe some of that away. Over here. Horizon line. Wipe it away. On the foot, I'm going to use kind of that combination of the blue and brown together and create some shading there. Same thing on this side. So you can see those couple of rivets there. You can see those now. They weren't even there before. So back to the brown. Horizon line. Leave the rest go. We're going to put an even more intense horizon line later with some of the brown liner. Now I've got this part of that armor plate. That's the blue and the brown mixed together. So again, picking up a little bit of that earth. There we go. So that's actually pointing down towards the ground. Back to my blue to get some shadow here. You see, I don't do a whole lot with the black because I wanna make sure that has it has either some blue or some brown, because again, it's all about sky, earth. If it's black, you're not going to have either. I'm going to water down some blue, so a little bit of some of that flesh shade with it, because I want to reflect a tiny bit of the face color there. So didn't want that to get too blue right next to where you got all that warm flesh tone. I'm going to go back to the blue. And work this edge here. Some of that shoulder plate there. I've got this rivet here. It needs a little definition. Sword blade on the earth part of it, right along the edge. Spin this around. Right along the edge of that too. Going to reinforce a few dark areas now that those have dried. So see in the hair right here, I want to provide a little oomph there, a little contrast. I could do that because I let my first layer dry. Same thing over here. Kind of shadow in there. This part right here, that's mostly the watered down nightshade with a little brown, little of the earth shade as a helper. More kind of subtle layers of the blue and brown. You can see I barely even touched the black. I may hardly touch it at all, except where I'm going to mix it with the brown. And I've got this top edge there. I want a little definition. Some more over here. I'm going to hit the underside of this again, just as I wait for kind of other things to dry. I'm going to use some black down here on the edge of the scabbard. So let's take some of that black, some of that brown, and right here, create even more horizon line over here. bottom side of your breastplate here that needs also horizon line. If you want even more control, you can go to that Winsor Newton Series 7 brush. I need a little definition along the bottom side of a little band along the head there. Want a little of the blue mixed with the brown. I've got the wings here, brown and black for another horizon line. Darkening on the gauntlet, down on the sword blade. Now, we haven't gone to the highlights yet. As you can see, compared to this, we haven't even gone into the middle tones on the earth portion of our sky earth. This is all about saying, okay, where are the darkest darks gonna be? Where is all that shading gonna be? Where's our contrast gonna come from? So again, thinking about, do I try another layer in the hair, darken that down, pull it down into the shadows. Face, don't want to do too much too, want to leave that alone. But you can see how, okay, here's this armor plate, but yet it's not this stark sky blue next to the flesh tone. Didn't want to do that. That's where the sword and these gauntlets, that's where it can really pick up the sky. I don't want that necessarily here on the faceplate and around where the face is. So at a certain point, this will be sooner rather than later just because of the compressed time frame. You kind of call it quits on your glazing. And let it dry where needed. And then we're going to go back in, work on some of those middle tones and some of the earth sections, and then really start to hit it with some of the highlights. For this vital part of kind of working in the mid-tones, put a few of the lighter colors back out, the verdigris, got the leather brown, the maiden flesh. And you can see I've left a lot of the glazes out on the palette, and that's good because what that'll do, it actually helps keep the paint flowing better, but it's also going to allow me to kind of mix these together and tone things down where need be. So what we're trying to do is put in some of this part in the earth tones and also restore any bright areas that might have gotten toned down too much with those glazes. So I'm putting out putting out a little bit of these colors here, some of the verdigris, and this is where I'm going to mix in. Again, so that's something that will help me keep that sky color from getting too bright too fast. And I'm going to pick a few sections to work on. Start here on that shoulder. Over here on this side of the chest plate. So I'm also smoothing some areas out here too. So on this plate on the head, wanted to create a little transition where it's somewhat darker on this side, a little more of the sky on this side. I want to do a highlight across the top when that dries. So top parts of these, the wings on the head, those definitely need to be hit with some of the brighter sky mix. Now for some of the blue, but this has been rendered a little bit transparent by mixing in some of the water. So you can see I was able to keep some of that, how the hair color bleeds into that. It almost looks like a seamless transition from here to sky. And that's really important. That is really helps you achieve that effect. The sky, of all that reflection on the armor. So I'm going to do a few areas on the chainmail, especially where the chainmail might reflect the sky. So hopefully I've got this at an angle where you can see it, and I'm going to pick out some of these individual loops and rings. Leave others go because some of those are going to actually need to get some earth tone. So watch what I'm doing here. I want some of this dark from the sword blade to reflect onto that armor plate. So what I'm doing is I'm working some light over here, leaving that alone. Leaving this alone, working over here. We've got this on the leg here. Want to create a horizon line. A little bit of a horizon line there. And leave it. Over here on this leg, same thing, a little bit there. Leave it. So what I'm trying to do is, there we go, save. Save my highlight, don't want to lose those. Turn this over here, and now for some light that goes right down the center of that armor plate. So again, pick out, got a few of these rings. I've got, looks like a belt buckle right there. Back to the sky blue. I've got this central part of the chest plate here. I want to do some of this. Bring out that rivet. Got that shoulder to bring out again. Now I don't know if I'll be able to hold this so that you can see it, but I want to taking a little bit of that flesh shade, mixed it in with my sky, because this is going to go underneath the chin, right over here. So I don't want this to be the bright sky blue, but it's got to be close to that. So there's a little bit right there underneath the face. Now, one of the reasons I kept out some of these glaze colors is, let's go into a few of our warmer glazes. Look at that. That's a nice juicy mix right there. Let's put that down here. We need that earth to be. Gonna make sure that I've got enough light. So here we go. You can see I'm going dark all the way through to my lightest. And we will put this so you can see it. As you can see, I'm kind of highlighting the underside, but not too much, and some of the earth color is going to get right over there. One step a little bit lighter. Same thing where you're down here on the shin. Pick out a few rings with some earth color. Back to that kind of toned down sky mix. I'm going to try and put a little bit on these ankles, carry that down. There's just a little bit here, a little bit here. I've got an armor plate here that I want to have some of the earth. It's very subtle. Don't know if you could even see that. But not only is it earth tone, but it's a little bit lighter. Just very subtle. Right there. We have to do sword blade. I'm going to try and hold this in a way that's solid for me, but you can see. So what I just did was turned it upside down, took some of this lighter version of the color, and just marched it right down the blade. Why? To do that. See, we've pretty much now almost fully replicated a little sketch. Turn this over this way. Again, put some of the light there. Let's get back into sky blue so you can see how this always starts to get very subtle, and it has to be. Spin this around. I want some. This is for the tops of the feet here. This part that's going to catch the sky. Lighten this up around the foot here, but not too much. I want to get this one little right along the edge where the toes are. Over here. I'm going to work on the top edge of that armor plate. We've got our gauntlet. And here I want to get some almost pure sky color. And pour some light next to that. The little rivet here, I'm going to put a highlight on that. And highlight the top edge and work on this horizon line here. Sword blade. I'll work that horizon right there. So what I did, light here, dark here, just like it is for the rest of the blade. The rounded part of that shoulder blade along here, need a horizon line. I need some highlights here. I need to work some earth tone magic in here. Back to some sky on this side. Back to my earth. Part right there. I want it to be even lighter. Let's make sure it's in the view for you. Front edge, put a little bit of a highlight there. So again, we haven't done a whole lot with highlighting. It's mostly focused on that middle range. And I still have some darks that I can put down. I'm going to do lighten a few sections of this plate on the top of the chest, top of the wings here. These plates on the knees. Again, think horizon line there. I want to put something right here on that part of the gauntlet. This needs a little bit of the, little more of the sky color. I want this to be a little bit brighter. So at this point, you're going to start to see some highlights start to creep in. The whole idea is that you don't want to use the highlights, I guess, as a crutch. You're using them as a finishing device. You're not using them as kind of the be-all and end-all of everything. So here's some of the lighter verdigris that I can use on some of these top edges here. And along where some horizon lines should be. I'm going to put a few along where this foot is, catch a couple of the rivets and that front edge and leave it be. Same thing with the other foot. As part of the shin guard there and there. On the top parts of these plates, on the rest there. So what I'm going to do is a few other little things, the hair, the eyes, stuff, do some of those things off camera, and then we'll get into kind of those darkest horizon lines and some of the really brightest highlights. I have a few colors out on the palette, the brown liner and the white, and pretty much just in these next couple of minutes I want to try and really reinforce some of those horizon lines. So try and make this so you can see it. I've got the brown liner. What I'm trying to do is work this edge right here. And what I want to do is try and get a little bit of, so you can see that's this is darker, a little more intense than the other one, so we're going to make the other one match that. We've got that established on that particular plate. We're going to do that here. Right there. At the top of this plate, we have to do across the knee plate there. I'm going to see if the sword weight can get a little bit darker down on the end. over here. Just right there, that little line. I'm going to restore some of these lines between the plates. A little bit there. See, this right here needs to be sharpened, more defined. Dark edge on the gauntlet. Let's see if I can get this in the scene for you. See that one spot there? And then just like that, as you can see how it's lighter here, darker here. Essentially what we've got on our example. I also need something similar right there. Need a little definition down by the feet here. So we've pretty much gotten the dark colors, the darkest darks that we need. Put some right there. The sword blade is pretty well set. Which means I'm going to do the last piece of this, and that's going to be taking those really bright colors. See, there's areas here that can be highlighted, areas around the horizon line. That's what some of these are, some of these brightest highlights. I can see there's just a few places I may, while I have the earth colors out, or I might want to just bring a little more there we go. And on the other side of that armor plate, just needed a little more there. I want a little more on the lower parts of the chin here. Okay, so we'll stop here and we'll try and try and hit some few very bright highlights to kind of finish off your effect. Out on the palette, I've got my white Maiden Flesh, tiny little bit of the Deep Sky, just in case I need it to work backwards a little bit more towards the dark. I've also got some of this Flow Improver out. It's going to be really important at this stage. I don't want things to get too watery and out of control, but yet, see, thin this down. So I'm going to pick a few spots along this that I know need some bright highlights, like this leading edge here. So right there, see this? Just that one spot. Gonna march my way right down. Just hitting those spots. The chainmail will need a few loops. Also, get a bright highlight. Just a few. I'm going to let some of these work their way down towards or along this edge, because that was just starting to disappear a bit too much. Just hit a few of those. Let's nab a few lights along the top surface of that plate. Do a few little highlights on that sword hilt. Now along these knee pads, try and rotate this around so you can see it. I want my horizon line to be nice and bright. Gonna catch some of this top edge there. Gonna let some of the Maiden Flesh in down there because it's so close to the ground. And just along that armor plate, do a little bit on toes there. On this side, the same thing. This is where I'm going to take some of the Deep Sky and some of the white. Gonna work in here a little bit. This needs a little more pizzazz, a little more sparkle. It's looking a little too subdued, a little too almost rusted. Don't want that, not with shiny, that's supposed to be shiny armor. I've livened this up a little bit. Go even a little further. With some of the white. Put some right here. So that adds a little more flavor. There. want to get as white as I can. Because now I've got this part of the chest plate. I want to get a few really bright highlights. Let's see if I can get the top edge. Top edge of the sword. Okay, this side of the, like this, certainly needs something here. Along that top edge, this top edge certainly needs a little something. Gonna check this. Okay, I see the chainmail back here. While a lot of it is in shadow, I still want to try and bring out a few rings. The wings will also need a bright highlight. So I hope that this will provide you with enough information so that you can approach this technique too. And you can refer back to this where you need to, and just think this is a little bit of a microcosm of the whole thing here. We have our earth colors and our sky, and that's all we're doing, is just balancing these against each other.
Here in my mind where it can all be seen. Hey!